The slap never landed. But everything that followed it would change 6 lives forever, and end several more. Sophia Reyes was carrying a tray of champagne flutes when she saw it coming. The woman's hand was already in the air, pale and ringed with diamonds, cutting through the warm glow of the ballroom like a blade. The old woman in the wheelchair below her didn't flinch. She didn't have time. And not a single person in that gilded room moved to stop it. Except Sophia. 3 weeks earlier, if someone had told Sophia that her life was about to be ripped apart and rebuilt from nothing, she would have laughed. Not because it was funny, but because she was too tired to do anything else. She worked double shifts at the Hargrove, New York's most exclusive luxury hotel, 5 nights a week. She came home after midnight, slept for 5 hours and woke up to give her younger brother Marco his medication before school. Then she drove 40 minutes to the hospital where their mother, Rosa, lay hooked to machines that kept her lungs working. She would sit there for an hour holding her mother's hand, talking to her about nothing. About the weather, about Marco's grades, about how the cherry trees on Orchard Street were finally blooming again. Then she drove back, changed her uniform and did it all over again. To the guests at the Hargrove, Sophia was invisible. She was the hands that refilled their glasses. The shadow that cleared their plates. A face with no name attached to no life worth imagining. She had learned to be small in rooms like that. Small and quiet and fast. It was safer that way. She had no idea that on the other side of the city, in a building without a public address, a man sat behind a desk reviewing surveillance footage of every person who would be working the hotel's annual charity gala. His name was Damien Volkov. And he missed nothing. Damien was 38 years old, with a jaw cut from stone and eyes the color of a winter sea, pale gray, cold, unreadable. He had built his empire over 15 years of careful, ruthless work. Politicians returned his calls on the first ring. Corporate boards adjusted their decisions after quiet dinners with him. 3 rival organizations had tried to move against him in the last decade. None of them existed anymore. He was not a man who raised his voice. He had never needed to. But under all of it, under the black suits and the armored cars and the men who stood at every door with hands folded and eyes forward, there was one thing that Damien Volkov kept hidden from the world. One thing that, if exposed, could destroy him more completely than any rival ever had. His mother. Elena Volkov was 61 years old and had not walked unaided in 4 years. The accident, a word Damien used through clenched teeth because it had been no accident at all, had left her spine damaged and her right side weakened. She lived in his mansion in a suite designed specifically for her comfort, with a full-time nurse named Petra and every luxury money could provide. But Elena did not want luxury. He wanted to feel like a person again. When she asked Damien for the 3rd time in 2 months if she could attend the Hargrove Charity Gala, a night she had once looked forward to every year before her injury, he said no. Twice. And then, watching her stare out the window at the city she used to move through freely, he said yes. He would regret it. And he would not regret it. Both things would be true at once. The night of the gala, Sophia arrived at the Hargrove 2 hours early to help set up. The ballroom was massive. Chandeliers like frozen waterfalls, tables dressed in white linen and gold, flowers flown in from somewhere that wasn't New York. The kind of room that reminded you exactly how far away you were from your real life. She tied her apron, tucked her hair back and got to work. By 8 o'clock the room was full. Politicians and socialites and old money and new money all circling each other with practiced smiles. Sophia moved through them like a ghost, refilling glasses, collecting empty plates, keeping her eyes down and her steps quick. She noticed the woman in the wheelchair near the east side of the room almost immediately. Not because she looked out of place, but because of how carefully she was trying not to. The older woman sat very straight, chin up, wearing a deep burgundy dress that had clearly been chosen with great care. Her silver hair was pinned elegantly at the nape of her neck. She was watching the room with a kind of hunger, like someone who had been kept away from something they loved for too long and was trying to absorb every detail before it disappeared again. Sophia felt something tighten in her chest. She recognized that look. She had seen it on her mother's face. She didn't know who the woman was. She didn't know the man standing 40 feet away, half hidden in the shadow of a marble column, watching the room with the stillness of someone who was always watching. She didn't notice his security detail. 6 men, positioned expertly, invisible to anyone who wasn't trained to see them. She just picked up her tray and kept moving. It happened fast. Elena had maneuvered her wheelchair slightly too close to the edge of the crowd, trying to get a better view of the orchestra warming up near the stage. A cluster of guests shifted suddenly, laughter, a spilled joke, someone stepping back, and the chairs will caught the hem of a passing server's jacket and lurched sideways. The glass of red wine on the small table beside her toppled. It caught Cassandra Vale directly across the front of her ivory gown. Cassandra was the kind of woman who had never been told no by anyone who mattered. She was 44, beautiful in a hard and expensive way, and had built her social position on the understanding that the world arranged itself around her convenience. She turned to face the source of the spill with the slow, terrible calm of someone who had already decided what was going to happen next. She looked down at Elena. "You," she said. Her voice was low and precise, designed to carry without seeming like it was raised. "You clumsy, useless old thing." Elena's jaw tightened. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "It was an accident." "An accident?" Cassandra's lip curled. She looked at the wheelchair, then back at Elena's face, with the kind of contempt that doesn't bother to disguise itself. "You shouldn't be here. People like you, people who can't even control themselves, have no business being in a room like this." The guests nearby had gone still. Not the helpful kind of still. The kind of still where everyone is watching and no one wants to be the one who steps in. Elena said nothing. Her hands were folded in her lap, perfectly still, but her knuckles had gone white. Cassandra stepped forward and kicked the side of the wheelchair hard. The chair rocked. Elena grabbed the armrests with both hands to keep from tipping. A soft gasp moved through the cluster of onlookers. Still no one moved. "Pathetic," Cassandra said. And then she raised her hand. Sophia's tray hit the floor before she had consciously decided to drop it. Glasses shattered. Champagne spread across the marble. Every head in the room turned at the sound. But Sophia was already moving, cutting through the frozen crowd with the kind of speed that comes not from training but from something deeper, something that bypasses thought entirely. She stepped between them. She caught Cassandra's wrist with both hands, stopping the motion completely. Cassandra staggered, startled. She had not expected resistance, and certainly not from a waitress. Her eyes went wide with pure, disbelieving fury. Sophia held on. Then she turned away from Cassandra and crouched beside Elena's wheelchair. The older woman was trembling slightly, though her face was composed with an effort that Sophia recognized immediately. The specific dignity of someone who refuses to fall apart in public. "Are you all right?" Sophia asked quietly. Elena looked at her. Really looked at her. The kind of look that takes a person's full measure in seconds. "I think so," she said. Her voice was steadier than her hands. Sophia straightened and looked at Cassandra. The entire ballroom was watching. The orchestra had stopped. Even the servers along the walls had gone still. "You don't get to hurt someone just because they can't fight back," Sophia said. Her voice didn't shake. She hadn't planned the words. They were simply true and she said them. Cassandra stared at her. Her face had gone through 3 different colors in 15 seconds. "Do you have any idea who I am?" she said. "Do you have any idea what I can do to you? You're a waitress. You're nothing." "Maybe," Sophia said. "But I'm still standing here." From the shadow of the marble column, Damien watched all of it. He had seen the moment the wine spilled. Had seen Cassandra turn. He knew who Cassandra Vale was, knew her family's financials, knew the favors she held over 3 city council members, knew things about her that would end her if they ever reached the wrong ears. He could have ended it himself in 10 different ways before it reached the point of a raised hand. He hadn't, because he needed to see what the room would do. He had spent 15 years learning that a person's truest nature appeared not in how they acted when the world was watching, but in what they did when they thought no one important was looking. The guests in that ballroom, politicians, executives, socialites, they all claimed virtue. He wanted to see what their virtue was worth when it cost them something. The answer was nothing. Every single one of them had looked away, or down at their phones, or suddenly discovered something fascinating about their own shoes. Not one of them had moved. Except the waitress. He watched her crouch beside his mother's wheelchair. Watched her speak quietly, hands gentle, eyes checking Elena's face the way a person checks on someone they actually care about. Not performing concern but feeling it. He watched her stand up and face Cassandra Vale alone, in front of 200 people, with no protection and no power and nothing to gain. He watched her hold. And something shifted in his chest that he stepped out of the shadow. The room felt it before it saw it. A change in atmosphere. A pressure drop the way the air feels before a storm. Conversations that had resumed after Sophia's confrontation dried up again, one by one as people registered the man walking slowly across the ballroom floor. Damien moved without hurry. He didn't need to hurry. The crowd parted for him the way water parts around a stone. Not because he asked it to, but because something in his bearing made people step back without knowing why. He stopped in front of Cassandra Vale. He didn't raise his voice. He never raised his voice. "Cassandra," he said. Just her name. Nothing else. But the way he said it, quiet and even and without warmth, made two people near her visibly step away. Cassandra had been preparing a response, building herself back up after Sophia's defiance. The sight of Damien Volkov erased all of it. Her color drained. Her prepared words dissolved. She was smart enough to know what his presence meant, even if she didn't fully understand the depth of what she had done. I wasn't, the old woman was. "My mother," Damien said. Still quiet. "She is my mother." The silence in the room was absolute. He pulled out his phone. Made one call less than 30 seconds, speaking in a low voice that no one else could hear. He hung up. Made a second call. 20 seconds. The third. He slid the phone back into his pocket and looked at Cassandra with the expression of a man who has already finished something and is simply waiting for the world to catch up. By morning, the Vale family's primary investment firm would be frozen pending a regulatory review that had been quietly triggered by a tip from an anonymous source. Cassandra's accounts would show irregularities that her financial advisors would spend 6 months trying to explain. And a series of photographs, taken at a private party 3 years ago, photographs Cassandra had believed were destroyed, would be delivered in sealed envelopes to 12 specific people in New York's social hierarchy. None of it happened loudly. None of it required Damien to raise a hand. That was not the beginning of the revenge. It was merely the opening line. Damien crossed the room to his mother. He crouched beside her wheelchair the way Sophia had and took both of her hands in his. They spoke quietly for a moment, too low for anyone nearby to hear. Elena shook her head once, then nodded, and something in her expression shifted. Relief, maybe, or the particular exhaustion that comes after holding yourself together through something terrible. Then Damien stood and turned to Sophia. He was still there. She hadn't fled, hadn't tried to disappear back into the service corridors the way another person might have. She was collecting the broken glass from the floor with a cloth napkin, on her hands and knees, cleaning up the mess from the tray she had dropped. He looked at her for a long moment. "Stand up," he said. Not harshly, but with the expectation of someone who was used to being obeyed. Sophia looked up at him. She recognized something in his face. Not the danger, though the danger was there, quiet and certain underneath everything. She recognized the way he had looked at his mother. The grief in it. The protectiveness. She stood. "What is your name?" "Sophia. Sophia Reyes." He nodded as if confirming something he had already looked up. "I want to offer you a position," he said. "Full-time care for my mother. Private residence. Your family's medical expenses covered entirely. A salary that will solve whatever problems you're carrying right now." He paused. "And protection for as long as you need it." Sophia stared at him. Around them, the ballroom had resumed a careful, muted version of its earlier noise. People talking again, but quietly and with frequent sideways glances. "Why?" she asked. The question seemed to surprise him. He was quiet for a second. "Because in a room full of people who looked away," he said, "you didn't." She thought of Marco. She thought of her mother in the hospital bed, the sound of the ventilator, the smell of antiseptic that clung to her clothes after visits. She thought of the credit card debt and the second job she had been considering and the look on her brother's face when he thought she wasn't watching. The specific fear of a 15-year-old who understands more than he should about how fragile everything is. "Okay," she said. "Yes." The car that picked her up the following morning was black and unmarked, and the driver did not make small talk. The mansion was on the north edge of the city, set back from the road behind iron gates and tall trees that blocked it from view. It was not what Sophia had imagined when she heard the word mansion. It was not showy or excessive. It was enormous and severe and looked like it had been built to withstand something. She understood within the first hour that it had been. There were 14 staff members that she could count, and she suspected there were more she couldn't. The men stationed at the exterior doors did not wear uniforms but stood with the particular stillness of professionals. The windows on the lower floor were thick in a way that window glass was not supposed to be. The kitchen had 2 exits. Every room she walked through had a clear line of sight to the nearest door. This was not a home. It was a fortress that had been made to feel like a home. Elena's suite was on the 2nd floor, south-facing, full of light. She was sitting up in bed when Sophia arrived, reading a novel with her reading glasses perched at the end of her nose. She lowered the book and studied Sophia with the same direct, measuring look from the night before. "You're younger than I expected," Elena said. "You're stronger than you looked last night," Sophia said. "In the best way." Elena's mouth curved. It was a small smile but real. "Sit down," she said. "Tell me about yourself. Not your resume. You." And so Sophia did. She talked about Marco and her mother and the apartment on the east side and the way her mother used to make arroz con leche on Sunday mornings before she got sick. Elena listened without interrupting, without the polite, distant expression of someone enduring a conversation. She listened the way people listened when they were actually interested. By the end of the first week, Sophia had reorganized Elena's physical therapy schedule, argued gently but persistently with the physician about adjusting her medication, and started taking Elena to the mansion's small garden every afternoon, where they would sit in the thin autumn sun and talk for an hour before Elena tired. Elena was smiling more. Not politely. Actually smiling. Petra, the previous nurse, noticed and said nothing. But the look she gave Sophia was complicated, not jealousy exactly. More like recognition. Like she was watching something she had tried to make happen for a long time happening. Damien watched. He was not obvious about it. He had cameras throughout the property, for security, always for security, and he told himself that was the only reason he sometimes found himself reviewing footage from the garden at the end of the day. Sophia and his mother talking. His mother's hands moving when she spoke, the way they used to before the accident, when she was still a woman who moved through rooms with energy. Elena laughing at something Sophia said. A real laugh, sudden and unguarded, the kind Damien had not heard in 4 years. He found himself stopping in the hallways when he heard their voices. He found himself rerouting his path through the house to pass by the garden. Sophia did not treat him the way everyone else in his world treated him. His staff were careful. His associates were strategic. Even the people who genuinely liked him had a layer of caution underneath their warmth. A permanent awareness of what he was and what he could do. It shaped every interaction always, whether they meant it to or not. Sophia was not cautious. She was not reckless either. She wasn't stupid and she wasn't naive. But she looked at him directly, answered his questions plainly, and once, in the hallway outside his mother's room, when he was in the middle of a call that was running long, told him quietly but firmly that he was going to have to take it elsewhere because his mother was trying to sleep. He had stared at her. And then he had walked down the hall to continue the call. He didn't examine why. But he started having dinner at the house more often. Started staying later. Started finding reasons to be in rooms where there was a chance he might run into her. She found out about the accident on a Tuesday. She hadn't been looking for it. She had been searching for Elena's original medical records, the ones from the initial injury which the current physician needed to adjust her treatment plan, and she had found them in a file in the estate office that was labeled, simply with a date. She read what had happened. Elena had not been injured in a car accident the way the official story said. She had been targeted. The vehicle that hit her had been deliberately driven by a man employed by a rival organization, a family called the Moreaus, who had been trying for years to destabilize Damien's operations by removing the one thing that made him human. They had succeeded in crippling Elena. They had failed in everything else. Damien had dismantled most of their infrastructure within 6 months. But the Moreau family had not been destroyed. They had retreated, regrouped, and waited. They were still out there. Sophia set the file down. She sat in the quiet of the estate office for a long time, looking at the wall, thinking about the woman in the garden who laughed at her jokes and was slowly, painfully, beginning to move her right hand again during physical therapy. Thinking about what it meant to be the reason someone like that had been hurt. She thought about Damien's face when he crouched beside his mother's wheelchair at the gala. The grief in it. She closed the file and said nothing to anyone. But she started paying attention to things she hadn't paid attention to before. The way the guard rotations worked. Which doors led where. The layout of the corridor exactly. Because something in her gut had started to whisper. She had been living in the mansion for 2 months when she realized she had become something more than an employee. Elena called her Mija once by accident in the middle of a conversation about nothing, and then looked startled by her own word choice. Sophia had pretended not to notice. But she had felt it settle somewhere in her chest and stay there. Damien had started leaving things outside her door. Books once. A novel she had mentioned offhandedly that she'd been meaning to read. A heavier coat when the walks to the garden got colder. Once, a photograph of a cherry tree in bloom with no note, that she understood without explanation was connected to something she had said about her mother. She was no longer invisible. Which meant she was no longer safe. The first sign was small. A car parked outside the gate 3 days in a row, different plates but the same model sitting just far enough down the road to seem coincidental. The second sign was a man in the garden shop near the estate's back wall who asked one of the junior staff, casually, who the new woman was that had been seen taking walks with the old lady. The third sign was when Sophia's brother Marco called her, confused, to say that a man had approached him outside school and asked him how his sister was doing. Sophia told Damien that night. His expression didn't change. But his eyes did. Something in them went very still in the way that meant things were moving fast underneath. He made 2 calls. Within 20 minutes, 4 additional men were on the property. Within an hour, Marco was in a car headed for the estate. He'll be safe here, Damien said. That's not what I'm worried about, Sophia said. He looked at her. What are you worried about? Elena. She paused. And you. He was quiet for a long time. You don't need to worry about me. I know, she said. I'm doing it anyway. It came on a Thursday evening at 7:14. When the sun had just dropped behind the tree line and the property was caught in that gray uncertain light between day and night. The first explosion took out the east gate. Sophia was in Elena's sitting room when the sound hit. Not a bang but a concussion, a pressure wave that rattled the windows and sent the reading lamp swaying. Elena grabbed her armrests. Sophia was on her feet before the echo died. Stay calm, Sophia said. Her voice was steady in a way she would not have predicted. We're going to move. He had thought about this. In the weeks since Marco arrived, in the quiet hours of the night when sleep came slowly, she had walked the corridors in her mind. She knew which passages ran behind the main rooms. She knew where the secondary staircase led out. She knew which part of the cellar had been retrofitted with reinforced walls. She moved Elena's wheelchair through the sitting room, through the connecting door to the bedroom, and into the service corridor beyond it. The sounds of the house had changed. Men shouting, boots on marble, somewhere distant the crack of gunfire coming in controlled bursts. She pushed the chair fast, navigating the narrow corridor by memory, the overhead lights strobing once and then going to emergency backup. Elena was silent, her face white but controlled, both hands gripping the armrests with everything she had. They were 40 feet from the cellar stairs when the door at the end of the corridor opened. Gregor stepped through. Gregor had been one of Damien's most trusted guards for 6 years. He was a broad-shouldered man with a quiet manner and a reputation for complete loyalty. Sophia had spoken to him a dozen times. She had believed everything she had seen. He was holding a phone. He looked at them and did not reach for his weapon. He didn't need to. Behind him, 3 men she had never seen were already filing into the corridor. I'm sorry, Gregor said. And he looked like he meant it, which was almost worse. I didn't have a choice. Everyone has a choice, Elena said. Her voice was like iron. They were taken to the East Wing, which had been isolated from the rest of the security network. Sophia kept her hand on Elena's shoulder. Elena kept her chin up. Victor Moreau was 56 years old and had been planning this night for 3 years. He entered the room where they were being held with the manner of a man who had already won. Measured, almost cheerful, the way powerful people get when they believe the outcome is settled. He looked at Elena first. Then at Sophia. The waitress, he said. Something like amusement crossed his face. You've made yourself very difficult to ignore. Sophia said nothing. Moreau pulled out his own phone and placed a call. When Damien answered, and Damien answered on the first ring, Moreau put it on speaker. Your mother, Moreau said. And the girl. Both of them are here with me. I want you to listen carefully, Damien, because I'm only going to explain the terms once. A silence on the line. The silence of a man who had been trained since birth to reveal nothing. You surrender the northern operations. All of them. Transfer of control, tonight signed and transmitted. You pull every contact you have in city government. You make one public statement acknowledging certain financial irregularities and you step back from everything. You do all of this by midnight and both women walk out of there unharmed. And if I don't, Damien said. His voice was completely flat. Then you lose them both. And you spend the rest of your life knowing that you could have stopped it. Another silence. Longer this time. I need 20 minutes, Damien said. Moreau smiled. You have 15. He ended the call and looked at the two women with the satisfied expression of a man watching a clock run down. He was not watching them closely enough. Elena had been doing physical therapy for 8 weeks. It had been slow, incremental work. Sophia sitting beside her every session, counting repetitions, arguing with the therapist to push the targets slightly further each time. The progress was real but small. Limited, the doctor said. Managed expectations, they said. What the doctors had not accounted for was Elena Volkov's anger. It had been building for 4 years. Quietly, carefully, with the discipline of a woman who understood that fury without direction was useless. Every session of therapy, every small improvement, every morning she woke up in a wheelchair and decided to do it anyway. It had all been going somewhere. She just hadn't known until tonight exactly where. The guard nearest to her had stopped paying attention in the way that guards stop paying attention when they're certain nothing is going to happen. He was 3 feet to her left, watching the door. Elena's right arm, the one that had been slowly, painfully rebuilding its strength for 8 weeks, came up and drove her elbow into the side of his knee with everything she had. He went down. Sophia moved the same instant. She had seen Elena's hand shift and understood in the half-second before it happened what was coming. She drove her shoulder into the second guard's midsection, knocking the air from him, and grabbed for the radio on his belt. She brought it down hard against the edge of the table once, twice, disabling it. Moreau spun toward them, fury replacing satisfaction so quickly that his face couldn't quite keep up. He reached for his own weapon. The door came off its hinges. Damien did not wait 15 minutes. He had never intended to. While Moreau was on the phone delivering terms, Damien's people had already located the signal, identified the building section, and moved into position. The 15-minute window was the time he needed to get himself into place. Not to consider surrendering, but to be standing on the other side of the correct door at the correct moment. What followed was not a fight. It was a conclusion. Damien's men moved through the East Wing with the efficiency of people who had prepared for exactly this. Every exit was covered. Every guard Moreau had brought was accounted for. Gregor, the traitor, was found in the corridor and taken without violence. Damien had specific plans for him that would not be rushed. Moreau himself tried to use Sophia as a shield in the final seconds, grabbing her arm, pressing backward toward the window. Sophia dropped her weight suddenly, pulling him off balance, and Damien crossed the room in 3 steps. It ended there. By midnight, the Moreau organization had no leadership, no operational capacity, and no safe harbor in any city where Damien Volkov had contacts. Which was every city that mattered. The 3 years Victor Moreau had spent planning this night had purchased him approximately 4 hours of advantage before everything he had built came apart. Gregor's end came quietly in private, and Damien was the only one present. He did not speak about it afterward. The East Wing was repaired over the following 2 weeks. The estate was quiet in the way that places are quiet after violence has passed through them. Not peaceful exactly, but settled. Like a held breath finally released. Elena slept for 14 hours the night after the attack. When she woke up, she asked for Sophia and for coffee in that order. Sophia brought both. They sat together in the repaired sitting room while morning light came through the window, not talking for a long time, which was its own kind of talking. You moved fast last night, Elena said eventually. You moved first, Sophia said. Elena's mouth curved. I did, didn't I? She lifted her right hand and studied it. The movement was still imperfect, still limited. But it was there. She turned it in the morning light like it was something she was seeing for the first time. More therapy, she said. More therapy, Sophia agreed. Damien found Sophia alone in the garden the evening after the attack. She was sitting on the bench where she and Elena usually talked in the thin November cold, looking at the bare trees. He sat beside her without asking, which she had noticed was something he only did with her and his mother. He asked permission in his way from everyone else. They were quiet for a while. You knew the layout, he said. The service corridor. You knew exactly where to go. I paid attention, she said. You prepared. He said it like it was a fact he was filing away. I had a bad feeling. She looked at him. I told you. You did. He was quiet again. Then, thank you. She had heard him say those words before. To staff, to associates, in the formal way of someone acknowledging a completed transaction. This was different. He heard the difference. She's your whole world, Sophia said. Not accusingly. Just stating something true. He looked at the bare trees. She was. For a long time she was the only thing. He paused. It's more complicated than that now. Sophia didn't answer. But she didn't look away either. He came to her room 3 days later. He knocked, he always knocked, which she had noted, and when she opened the door he was holding a single sheet of paper. He recognized it. It was her contract. The employment agreement she had signed the morning after the gala, in the Hargroves' back office, with his attorney watching. He tore it in half. I'm not offering you a job, he said. I'm not offering you payment or protection or any of the things that were on that paper. He held her gaze. I'm asking you if you want to stay. For reasons that have nothing to do with what you can do for my family. For reasons that are about you. Sophia looked at the two halves of the paper in his hands. What happens if I say no, she asked. Then you leave with everything I promised you. The bills, the money, the safety, and I don't ask again. And if I say yes? Then you stay, he said, as yourself. Not as an employee. Not as something I hired or own or control. As a partner. In whatever form that takes. He paused. A rare thing. She had noticed he was a man who chose his words carefully and rarely paused. I don't have much experience with that, he admitted. But I'm willing to learn. Sophia thought about the woman she had been 8 weeks ago. The double shifts and the debt and the invisible life, moving through rooms full of people who could not see her. She thought about Elena's laugh in the garden, and Marco doing his homework at the kitchen table now, safe and fed and no longer afraid. She thought about cherry trees on Orchard Street. I'm not going to disappear into your world, she said. I need you to understand that. I'm going to keep being who I am. I know, he said. That's why I'm asking. She took the two halves of the contract from his hands. Then yes, she said. The Hargroves' annual charity gala was held every November, the third Thursday of the month, without exception. The guest list shifted from year to year. Some names rose, some fell, new money displaced old. But the structure of the evening remained the same. Chandeliers, white linen, champagne in tall glasses, the orchestra warming up near the stage. 1 year after the night that had changed everything, Elena Volkov entered the ballroom on her own 2 feet. It was not without difficulty. She walked with a cane, slowly, and Damien was at her left side and Sophia at her right. The physical therapy had been 8 months of hard, incremental, sometimes discouraging work, and the progress would always have its limits. But she was walking. She was upright. She was wearing the same burgundy dress, a choice she had made deliberately, and her silver hair was pinned at her nape the way it always was. The room noticed. Not because Elena had ever been famous in this world, but because the man beside her was Damien Volkov, and anyone who had been at the gala the previous year remembered what had happened in this room, and the woman walking beside him was not who anyone had expected to see in that position. Sophia wore dark green. She had her hair down. She was not invisible. He did not try to be. The people who greeted them were careful and respectful in the particular way of people who understand what is standing in front of them. There was no Cassandra Vale in the room. She had relocated to a smaller social circle in a different city, which was perhaps more kindness than she deserved. The other guests found reasons to smile warmly at Elena, to compliment her dress, to treat her with the careful consideration of people who had been reminded recently that small cruelties have long memories. Sophia moved through the room beside Damien and felt something she had not felt in a ballroom before. Like she belonged there. In the spring that followed, Sophia started the Reyes Foundation. It was not a grand operation at first. A rented office, 2 staff members, a phone that rang more than expected from the very first week. Its purpose was specific. To provide emergency financial and medical support to families in the situation Sophia had once been in. The people who were drowning slowly, invisibly, in debt and care burdens and double shifts, who were too busy surviving to ask for help even when help might have been available. People like the woman she used to be. Elena was on the board. Marco, who was 16 now and had started asking questions about law school with the seriousness of someone who had decided early what he was going to do about the world he lived in, came to every board meeting and took notes. Damien funded it without being asked. When Sophia found out and asked him why he hadn't said anything, he shrugged. A gesture she had come to understand was the way he expressed things he found difficult to articulate. "Because it's yours," he said. "I didn't want it to become mine." She looked at him for a moment. "You're not as hard to understand as you think you are," she said. He almost smiled. "Don't tell anyone." The second gala fell on a cold, clear Thursday. The kind of night where the city looked like something out of a movie, all light and height and the particular electricity that New York carried on its best evenings. They arrived together. Elena first, walking steadily, nodding to people she recognized with the composure of someone who has moved back into a world that once tried to push her out. Then Damien, his hand resting light at Sophia's back, a gesture so quiet and consistent that neither of them noticed it anymore. At some point in the evening, after the dinner and the speeches and the orchestra's second set, Sophia and Damien stood together near the east side of the room, the same wall where Elena's wheelchair had been a year ago, where everything had started. She was watching the room, the people, the particular performance of wealth and power and social position that she understood now from the inside as well as the outside. Damien was watching her. He took her hand. Not for the room, he didn't make gestures for rooms. For her. His thumb moved across her knuckles once, the way it did when he had something to say that he hadn't finished finding words for yet. "You know what I've been thinking about?" he said quietly. "Tell me." He was quiet for a moment, the way he was quiet when something mattered. "A year ago I was in a room full of powerful people. Every one of them would have done anything I asked. Every one of them was afraid of me or needed something from me or both." He paused. "And the one person in the room who had no reason to do a single thing for me, who had nothing to gain and everything to lose, was the only one who moved." Sophia looked at him. "You didn't just save my mother that night," he said. "You saved what was left of me." The room moved around them. The orchestra played. The city pressed its lights against the tall windows. Sophia turned her hand in his until their fingers were laced together properly, the way you hold someone when you mean it. "The thing about people who are invisible," she said, "is that they see everything." He looked at her. And for the first time in as long as anyone in his world could remember, for the first time in longer than Damien himself could clearly recall, the most feared man in New York City smiled. Not because power had won. Because for the first time in his life he had chosen something greater than power. And in that choice he had finally become someone worth choosing back. Thank you for watching. Tell me what you learned from this story in the comments.